And we've been given a gift, and the gift is the ability to feel the way another human feels and put ourselves in another human's shoes. And it expands us. And it expands the stuff right under our nose that we're able to perceive. But we have to open ourselves to it. We have to use it. We have to use it as much a part of our daily vocabulary as the use of words is a part of our daily vocabulary. In school, they teach us how to read and write. They teach us how to use words. If we're lucky, we go to college and they teach us how to write coherent papers, how to really express ourselves when we're trying to dig for sophisticated things. That's what education at the college and university level does for us. But we're not taught anything about how to develop the powers of empathy. And the powers of empathy are one of our greatest powers to see not just what's under our nose, but what's around us, including what's going on the other side of the earth. How do we put ourselves in the feet of the Chinese? How do we put ourselves in the shoes of the Chinese leaders? How do we put our feet in the shoes of these totalitarian leaders? What are they thinking? How do we know what they're feeling? We have to. We share the planet with them. At the very least, we have to in order to expand the range of our knowledge as far as our knowledge can go. So empathy is like a microscope or a telescope. It's an enormous gift. It's not as precise as a microscope, a telescope, or an oscilloscope, but it expands our ability to see, because it expands our ability to feel.
Would you say that empathy comes from our invisible self? Where does it come from?
Well, we don't know. All we know is mirror neurons. Once upon a time, some Italian researchers had wired up the brain of a monkey so that they could get at least some hint of what was going on in the monkey's brain. And they were going to perform an experiment in which they offered the monkey something to eat, a common reward that's used for getting monkeys to do something. But they made the mistake of bringing a cup of coffee and a snack into the lab, and where the monkey could see it. And as the researcher lifted the cup and ate the snack, the monkey's brain was going off. And the part of the monkey's brain seemed to be going off that mimicked the researcher who was not on, he was on his off time. It seemed to mimic the researcher's hand gesture, reaching for the cup and reaching for the snack and putting the snack to his mouth. And they hadn't expected any activity until they started the fucking experiment. And this was not the experiment. What they discovered was what's called mirror neurons. And there's a set of neurons in the monkey's mind where if the monkey sees you turning a somersault, the monkey in his own brain uses the muscular apparatus he would use to try to do a somersault, and that apparatus goes off as if the monkey were doing a somersault. Except the trick is, and this is a trick for your patients who can't tell the difference between their fantasies and their realities, there's a switch basically that says, don't do this. Just ape it in your brain, okay? Don't actually try to do the somersault. And we all have that. We are all, the mirror neurons in our brain are mirroring all kinds of things that we see around us all the time. And they work so effectively that eventually in a conversation, if I hold my hand and head like this, eventually you will hold your hand and head like this. Yes, if I start nodding a lot, eventually you will start nodding. And to a careful researcher, and there are careful researchers who have watched this, it'll be obvious we're developing some kind of synchrony with each other. And that synchrony will come about in part because of the mirror neurons, in which we're trying to be the other as much as we are ourselves. And it's very valuable to be the other as much as yourself. If you are a stag, and you've spent the whole year trying to bulk yourself up with the best, you've tried to get the best territory so you can get the best food, you've tried to eat the best food so you can be the strongest, you've tried to do everything in your power to become the strongest. Why? Because you're an outcast. There's a group of females. They're a group. They hang out together. And then there's you and the other males. You're all rivals. You all have your individual territories. You all stand apart from each other. It's a very lonely life. And the only way to become an insider is to fuck one of the females or fuck all the females. And the only way to do that is to come out on top in the struggle between the males for position in the hierarchy. So you start by getting the best territory you can possibly get. That territory includes the best food you can possibly get. That food gives you the best body you can possibly get. And I don't know how stags do it, but they get exercise and they practice their fighting skills. I don't know how they do it. But one way or the other, well, through play. Play is one of the ways that they practice their fighting skills. And then the day comes when it's for real, when the top position is up for grabs, and he who gets the top position gets all the females, and the other males get nothing. Nothing but the same kind of isolation they've already endured all year, and the year before that, and the year before that. And when one stag goes against another, they walk in parallel, and they try to look as magnificent and strong and confident as possible, unafraid of anything. And each stag eyes the other. And in all probability, the mirror neurons of the stag eyeing his opponent tell him about his opponent. They mirror his opponent. They simulate, to use the computer term, they simulate the opponent to the best of their ability. And eventually, in most of these cases, there is no actual conflict. The two stags come to a conclusion about who looks the stronger and more magnificent, and the one who is the less strong or magnificent, basically, in stag ways, calculates if he gets into a fight, he's going to lose. And he backs off. And that's the end of his chances for all those females. That's the end of his chances to be part of a warm and loving group. He's back out in the cold again. So these mirror neurons are very important in evaluating a competitor and figuring when you can make a challenge, when it does make sense to engage in a struggle, when it does make sense to try to rise in the hierarchy, and when it doesn't. And in chickens, the hierarchy stays pretty much the same most of the time. But chickens have to mirror each other in their brains to figure out how to get along with each other. So presumably chickens have mirror neurons too. It isn't just chimpanzees and human beings. Because the ability to simulate things is extremely important. The ability to simulate, I mean, you look at a cup, you don't need to touch it to know how it feels. You simulate that cup in your hands. It's part of your process of perceiving the cup. And you do that even more with another human being. And the mirror neurons help you do that. Most of what goes on in the brain is simulation. Simulation of the realities in front of you so that you know what is a snack and what is a poison. So you know what steps to take in order to walk a path. And mirror neurons and empathy are ways of simulating others. And it turns out that our relationship with others are far more important than our relationships with what we call the environment. Others make the fabric of our lives. Other creatures of our kind. It's true for mice and rats. It's true for dogs and cats. That's why your dog wants to socialize with every other dog he sees when he's taking a walk. It's very hard to get the dog to pay more attention to you than to another dog. That's why if you go to a park where there's a dog run and you let your dogs loose, the dogs will play with each other as a pack and have an enormously good time, even though the dog, in all probability, has all the neurons it takes to simulate you, because you're the most important aspect of his environment. You feed him, you give him love. He loves that love. He couldn't exist without that love. So the ability to simulate is a basic part of the brain's process, the brain's way of getting along in the world, of surviving and thriving. But we have specialized neurons, mirror neurons, for simulating each other. And presumably empathic powers are generated in part by those mirror neurons and in all probability in part by other things like the hippocampus and the amygdala. The hippocampus probably helps us mirror the more positive parts of others, and the amygdala the more threatening parts of others. And then there are things like the motor strip in the brain that help us mirror the muscular aspect, the movement aspect of others. Are we? Yeah, we're 8:38.
Interesting though, you see me
Yeah,
and I see you. And in that mirroring, I become you in my mind because I
right,
don't see myself unless I'm
right.
looking in the mirror, and that's a strange aberration that has only come about since the advent of mirrors.
Well, no.
And
I think we humans are probably look.
and
Your dog can see himself in your eyes, mirrored in your eyes, because he can see the extent to which you really care about him. I get disturbed. I ran into a dog today. I run into lots of dogs.
well, we know that.
Okay.
Yeah, you're part dog yourself.
Yeah, and I got lots of kisses from dogs today, and it was really wonderful. And I ran into a dog at the corner of President Street and 6th Avenue when I was almost all the way home for my walk in the park. And as soon as the dog saw me and realized that I was friendly, the dog got excited, and I got down on my knee as I always do with dogs, and the dog gave me a great big kiss, just licked my nose. And then the dog turned its attention immediately to its mistress again and just kept looking up at his mistress with tremendous expectation. And I wondered why. Of course, I was jealous that the dog was no longer paying attention to me, even though he obviously liked me. And then I realized the dog was waiting for kibble. A lot of people reward their dogs with kibble. I think that's a terrible idea because what your dog really wants, if the dog were given a choice between kibble and attention, it's the attention the dog really likes. And it's the love that's really going to add the most to your life and add the most to the dog's life. So distracting the dog with the notion that material rewards like kibble are really it is wrong. Immaterial rewards like love for a dog, for a friendly dog, that means everything in the world. And I would much rather be part of the process of rewarding the dog with love. I can't be kibble. It certainly wouldn't be good for me to be swallowed and chewed and swallowed. So I get upset when I see owners that are distracting themselves, that are distracting their dogs from the real deal, which is the love and attention, with something phony and artificial, the kibble.
So why do we have dogs? And what is it about humans who look to another species for love rather than their own?
Well, love with your own species is very difficult because in the same way that the stags have this life and death situation where they go up against each other to determine their position in a dominance hierarchy, we humans are constantly up against each other in a dominance hierarchy. And even in a love relationship, there's a dominance hierarchy. Even in a love relationship, there's one person who is less in love than the other and feels superior to the other. There's one, and the other is madly in love with the person. The alpha person doesn't have to be in love. But the subordinate person is madly in love and looking up to the other. The other probably thinks that he's actually worthy of something better or something like that. So there's already an alpha and a beta in a relationship. And that means there's struggle in a relationship. But in a relationship with it, and we all need love, it's back to that apoptotic pre-programmed cell death mechanism. We have self-destruct mechanisms. And if we feel loved, they turn off. And we have thriving mechanisms. And if we feel loved, they turn on. But it's very hard to get love because it's a constant struggle with somebody that you're allegedly in love with or mated with, or it's very, very difficult. It's another human being. It was Konrad Lorenz who saw this. He saw that mating rituals are actually adaptations of threat rituals. They're actually adaptations of fighting rituals. They have slight variations that mark them out as mating rituals. And the reason they're adaptations of threat rituals is because our natural response to each other is that's a competitor. Now, that's not our only natural response to others. Our natural response to others is also that's a collaborator. Yet we're talking about the fact that you don't ride a horse of the invisible self. You ride a herd of horses in the invisible self, and many of them want to go off in their own strange directions. So the fact that at the same time we are a competitor to the individual that we're with, and a collaborator with the individual that we're with, two different horses, two different directions. But dogs, no, we're not in competition with them at all. And they give us unconditional love. And it's love without struggle. It's love without competition. If they were part of our species, all of a sudden they're struggling for the same, what's it called, the same niche, for the same kinds of things. And then there's competition. They don't compete with us. They don't compete with us. And that's how they were able to tame us. They compete with each other, but not with us.
What do you mean tame us? We're
Well,
supposed to be the
about
ones who are
somewhere,
taming them.
no, somewhere between 11,000 and 9,000 years ago, some dogs, probably dogs who were going after the same scraps of meat that humans were going after. Let's imagine there's a carcass, and it's got meat. Well, the first creatures to get to it tend to be the vultures, and the next creatures who tend to get to it tend to be the dogs. But if humans are around, the next creatures that get to it could be the humans, and the humans and the dogs are in competition. Well, obviously, some puppies must have discovered that, hey, instead of trying to get love from the group, which is a tricky proposition, love within your own group if you're a dog is very difficult. Because in groups of dogs, yes, dogs hang out in a pack. But when it comes time to mate, only one male gets to mate and only one female gets to mate. And the rest have to stay celibate, without sex. Well, that's a difficult life to lead. You are number 2 or number 3 or number 4 or number 5 or number 6 or number 7. If you manage to sucker a human into a relationship, first of all, the human's going to get you the food. The human's always going to take you with him when he goes to get food. The human's even going to let you hunt for him. Well, hunting, if you're doing it for sport and you don't really need it for food, have you seen the way dogs look when they are hunting? Their tails are wagging. Their eyes are filled with joy. That's sport. That's play, as long as they're not starving. Well, the human's going to take you with them along with him on the hunt. The human's even going to let you do the chasing. That's great. All you got to do is sucker this human in by looking adoringly into his eyes and wagging your tail. That's it. He'll pet you. I mean, you've got him. And he'll give you shelter. He'll make fires and keep you warm at night. And you won't have to compete with other dogs because as far as the human is concerned, you're number 1. Hey, who's he going to value more? His mate, who he's got all kinds of battles with? Or you, who he doesn't have to compete with at all? You're number 1, period. So all you have to do is tame that human. And you're in. You're in big time. And the dogs who discovered how to do this, look how well they're doing. If you look at the statistics on how much dog food is purchased in the average year, it's phenomenal. The number of dogs who chose the old way of doing things, the natural way of doing things, the be close to Mother Earth way of doing things, the stick with your purity kind of thing, there are very few on this planet today. Very few. They probably number in the hundreds of thousands. But the dogs who learn to tame humans, they number in the tens or hundreds of millions. So suckering humans into a deal of unconditional love in exchange for heating, a roof over your head, food, and having somebody who will take you to the hunt and let you do the fun part of the hunting. Hey, all you have to do is wag your tail.